Ladies and gentlemen, it is 2:07 p.m. and we'll now begin the school board workshop of January 24th, 2017. On our list of discussion items today, we have an accreditation update with Dr. Denise Carlin, FSBA Master Board training discussion, and also a discussion with the superintendent on future workshop topics. Let's begin then. Welcome, Dr. Carlin.
Members, Dr. Atkins and Mr. Martin, we are here, Cindy and I, today to provide you with an update on how we are doing relative to our required actions, our 5 required actions as a district. As you'll recall, we received an advanced ed visit in March of 2014, and we are now approaching the 3-year mark, which is really hard to believe. It's gone by very quickly. They will be returning as an external review team in 2019, and while that sounds like it's quite a ways away, we do want to make sure that we are continuing to move forward. And I will tell you, I'm very pleased to report that there has been a tremendous amount of progress, and we will share what the progress has been today, as evidenced by a progress report that was submitted. You all had received a copy, minus our new board members way back when, but you had received a copy of the progress report. So we'll be updating a little bit of that today, and then we invite you to share. So if there are strategies that we have missed or something new that has occurred or something else you think should be included as we move forward with this work, please, today's the day to weigh in on that. And of course, we're always available. If you need to speak with us one-on-one, we're happy to do that. So again, I'm going to turn it to Cindy, and she's going to share the first required action and progress that has been made. Then I'll step in and I'll do a few more of them. Cindy?
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Atkins. Our first required action was related to data analysis processes and procedures. So the district has taken several steps to address these concerns, beginning with our strategic planning process. If you recall, when we had a briefing not too long ago on Vision 2020, there were 3 goals, targets that were specifically related to the use and the availability of data within our district. There's also been some significant work done on a data dashboard, and that was demonstrated by Brian Curls for you at the last board briefing. As a result of these actions, Advanced Ed has increased the performance rating on that standard from a 2.0 to a 3.0.
The next 2 required actions are very closely linked, and so we put them on one slide together. It is relative to procedures associated with the implementation of our policies as a board, and then the autonomy of the system and board as well as the superintendent, and how that system and the leadership works together. And so some of the key elements of work that we've done since the team came through in March of 2014 is there has been the development of an operating manual, as you all are familiar with, that contain the board procedures for how policies will be implemented, and if there's a slip, how we get that back on track. So that has been developed since 2014. A number of our board members have engaged in master board training, which is really exciting because a lot of that training speaks directly to the feedback that we received from Advanced Ed, and so that's a really good thing. And to our new board members, I know there's been discussion about getting involved in that, and so I would encourage that because Advanced Ed is seeing progress and they're very happy with that. Also, there was reference in both of these to the board policies being reviewed, and I'm really happy to report that that is happening. We've had Ms. Elkin here with a number of our team members walking through revisions that you've had heavy input on, and those revisions are coming forward in board policies. And so I do believe that Advanced Ed will be very pleased with the work that has occurred in that regard. So again, those are 2 areas that are really moving forward. I wanted to put in some advocacy around looking at the operation manual now that we have some new board members, just taking a look to our new board members, inviting you to look at to see if there are edits that may need to be made or suggestions you have to make that even better. That's what we would invite you to do. I do know that some of that work was to be started in November when we met as a workshop as a team, and so I just invite, as we have the conversation today about which workshops we may want to have, that may be an opportunity for us to take a look at as a board. Is there work you want to do on onboarding manual. So I offer that just as a thought. And then moving on to evaluation. So our work here is really how is the board doing as a team? And you'll recall that there is a self-evaluation that the board went through last year. It was around February, March. And so that time is approaching again. And so again, just some encouragement. And we are here to help if there's anything we can do to work with you on that. Very pleased to be of assistance. But again, really looking at how are we evaluating our work as a board, how are we doing together, and then looking toward an action plan. What are the strengths that we have as a board, and how do we keep those as strengths? And what are those areas that we need to continue, those opportunities to work together, and what is the action plan around that? So again, here's some opportunity for us to work. I will tell you, again, like Cindy, very happy to report that when we submitted our progress report, each one of these areas was elevated to a 3.0. Which is terrific news because it's evidence that Advanced Ed is seeing progress and that all of those have now moved to an acceptable level at a 3.0. I'll turn it over to Cindy now for required action 5.
Thank you. So our last required action revolved around the student support services and the availability of those support services. So in response to this requirement, the full array of student services was examined and goals were developed to address the needs of all students, including those with very high needs. As part of this assessment, all of our school counseling programs were evaluated to see if they were in alignment with the American School Counseling Association standards. As a result of this, all of our schools are now receiving training on the comprehensive counseling model, which is a 5-year training and implementation plan that has been put into effect. In addition, there were several processes that were improved along the way. A couple of the results of those include being able to conclude the health screenings in a shorter timeline, and also in being able to continue to meet the evaluation timelines that are imposed by the state in a timely manner, even though the district has grown, and the timeline has actually been compressed for those to be completed, and yet they've still been able to meet those demands. So they're very pleased about that. As a result of these actions, again, the performance rating was increased from a 2.0 to a 3.0.
So at this point, we are available to you for questions, suggestions, input, ideas, anything else that you'd like to see included as we move forward with this work on our required actions.
Board, Mrs. Morgan?
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the very lengthy report because I think it really helps the new members understand where we were 3 years ago and the steps that have been taken. And I appreciate you being very brief in your update today. I would like to mention to the board, though, that there are a couple of things that we have not done that we say we have done, and you have very gently treaded around that. It says that in our pre-organization workshop, we will review protocols. We have not done that. It also says that we will do a self-assessment, which we did, and create an action plan, which we did not. So if the team were to walk in today, they would say, we are not in compliance with the response that we have given. And so I think I want to say that before we go into the discussion about workshops that the board needs to have. Those are my comments.
What was your second one? The protocols was what? The first one?
First one. The second one was a self-assessment that was going to result in an action plan. We did not. We never were able to meet.
Right.
And I think if we didn't have enough time that day to go ahead and do the action plan, we should have gone ahead and scheduled a follow-up meeting to have that in place, and it just did not happen.
Board members, any other comments? Mrs. Patrica?
I have a question. Page 16 of the agenda, and I believe it's page 11 of the report, it says, what is the process and the protocol that is used by the board if an individual board member veers outside of their defined role and/or responsibility? That was a question that I had going into our pre-organizational meeting, and I don't see how that's been answered in what we've done since. So,
Okay, are you looking at page 16 of the?
page 16 of the agenda, page 11 of the accreditation report.
Thank you.
So,
What happened
I guess
is-
to dovetail what Mrs. Morgan just said,
That part, I
it's-
believe, should have been covered within the policy protocol handbook. one of the components that we were going to do to help us monitor each other was, we had talked about in a workshop, have something that we could use that would show up in your office, and then your job was to go and find the person who put it in your office to find out just what it was that, you were, to find out what you did that was out of compliance, so there could be that conversation. So something to be done in a lighthearted way, but part of the key essential piece was to have that protocol piece developed. But as you mentioned it, I remember, I think about that part. It needs to be more streamlined. There are a lot of parts of it that are very cumbersome. And I believe if we get that streamlined and we review it, then there's the less chance of a likelihood of that happening.
Thank you, Mrs. LaRiviere. Any other comments? And I think that's one of the discussions that we did have, that we would review the protocol manual and streamline it, because it's way too cumbersome. And we wanted to do that in anticipation of new board members, but again, I think one of our difficulties has come, as Mrs. Morgan said, in follow-up and taking the time to actually implement the actions based on the decisions we make. Yes.
And
Ms.
I would
Morgan.
suggest that when we do the protocols, we build in date certains for the things that we have committed to. That way, the staff knows, the superintendent knows, we know that we will be doing what we will be doing when we will be doing it.
Yes, I agree.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much. I think we have a direction to go in, and of course, we'll be always looking forward to your support and helping us to stay on task. Thank you. Okay. Then next on the agenda, which kind of follows up almost naturally, is discussion about master board training. And I think at the board reorg, we had some discussion about that. And I'm happy that this coming Friday, we will be doing some team building with the board. And I think that that is one of the parts of the action plan that would fill the bill as far as, what are we doing after the self-assessment? Although our self-assessment was done with a different group. So we'll move right along with that. I think that I had sent out a message asking about the 2017-18 Master Board training. So there are some sessions scheduled with other districts off-site at Mission Hill Resort at Howey in the Hills. Looking at the responses that we received so far, and Mrs. Morgan, you say all dates are good for you, and I think some people have a conflict in early April. There was some mention about having it on site rather than having to travel out of town. So one of the things that I wanted to do today was to get some discussion on that and see if there's a consensus that we would be better off requesting that. I do have a call in to Tina Pinkeson of FSBA, and she's traveling right now, so I wasn't able to get a definite response from her regarding time, and I thought even before I speak to her, I'd rather have us come up with some dates possible and a request for the location that would be most convenient and conducive to following through with this. The other comment I wanted to make real briefly was, I think that if we're going to do the master board training, we really need to have a commitment to all participate. So we want to work to make it as convenient for all members who may have some other, commitments and jobs and family issues, so that we can follow through with that and be able to come together. So I would open it up for discussion on that, and I see Mrs. LaRiviere's got her hand up. Thank you.
Well, I believe there are at least 3 other board trainings that are part of the master board that will automatically be done here.
Yes.
Am I correct about that? Okay.
Yes, yes, there were 3 choices, April, May, or June, off-site to begin the first session. And then, but we can also do it by appointment, just this board. on-site or with another district nearby. And then sessions 2, 3, and 4 are on-site training.
So
it's the first
So the
session.
order is different than it had been, because we had done sessions prior to going off-site.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And that was the way it was presented. However, in a recent conversation with Ms. Pinkerson, she did say that we could make the arrangements to do the entire board training here in Lee County if it would be more doable for us. Mrs. Morgan?
Having attended the master board training, was it last year or 2 years ago? I can't remember.
2 years ago.
2 years, yeah.
Anyway, the one benefit of doing it with other boards, and we were in very poor shape, and we were working with a board that was in terrific shape. And so you could see, where you were going as a
Right.
board. And I found that illuminating. And so I think that's the one downside I see of not going off-site and doing it with another board.
There is a potential for us to do it on-site and for them to invite other districts to participate here.
Okay.
So that might be. And then I think, Dr. Kuckel, you were
Yeah,
next.
that wouldn't be my preference if we could combine with other districts but do it locally. It's hard for me to travel right now, so, and that may be better later on, but
Okay, okay. So then, Mrs. LaRiviere?
And just one caveat that was nice about it, even though we really were not in the best shape at that time as a board. But being in a hotel facility where you were able to get together in the evening and chat and talk and have that camaraderie with the other board and also with each other for relationship building. So that would be my only suggestion, to see if there might be some way we could have it make it kind of a staycation, staying in Lee County, but someplace where that would allow us that time to be sequestered during that whole time period, so we could have some good quality time with each other.
Thank you. Dr. Kuckel?
when I went through master board training before with the previous board, I think our location was at the Doubletree in Naples, so it was out of town, but yet not too far away. And I don't recall how many nights we stayed overnight, but I do know sometimes we drove home, and sometimes the sessions went into the evening, and we didn't. I think those were bunched.
Okay. So then, those are the issues that I'll bring up to FSBA and see how they can accommodate us in that way. And the preference I'm hearing is that we either stay local or very nearby, and that we do involve other boards in our initial training.
And yeah, that initial 2-day, 1-night.
Right.
And we have lots of good places close by that would,
Yes, and then we also have to make sure that the superintendent is available also, and that's his preference. So, Dr. Atkins, do you want to weigh in at all? Okay. But you do want to come, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
Oh,
not.
absolutely.
Dr. Kuckel, I just had a question, like, Naples is an hour that way, but what about like Sarasota, an hour north? I mean, are you capable of, okay, so you could have Ms. Pinkerton work on other districts to see what would accommodate
exactly.
more than less. So it might be, we may have to go north an hour instead of south an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm game
That's
with
true.
either,
Sarasota
but I
might
just want to make sure everybody's on the same page and I think we can, as long as you're, can accommodate that. I just want to make sure.
Okay, so then,
Ms.
yes.
And that makes sense to me. Before, we were combined with with Miami. So
Yes.
that's why we met in between. So that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Good idea.
Right, and I think that they'll be looking at boards also who have new members and are looking, have people who are interested in the training who haven't done it before. But I just wanted to reiterate that I really hope that we can commit as a full board to do this, because, although we take certified board member trainings, independently and individually, that really does not achieve the purpose that we want from Master Board training, that we come together as a cohesive group and be able to function in a way that we make joint decisions that are effective and help our district. So,
Tell me where to be and when to be there, and I'll go,
okay.
as long as it's not April.
Okay, so then I will get from her a series of dates when they can be available, and it would be 2 days for the first session, and then 3 follow-up sessions of 4 hours each. So it is a time commitment, but, okay. Well, then I think I have my marching orders to discuss with them, and then I will get back to you in memo form to let you know what's available, and then we can schedule. Okay, thank you for that. And then moving right along, Dr. Atkins would like to have a discussion with us regarding what types of workshops would the board like to have. And we've had a lot of discussion around workshops and have been, for one reason or another, unable to actually schedule enough workshops to meet the needs of the board in addressing the topics that are of the most concern. So, do you want to start, Dr. Atkins?
Well, just a couple things I wanted to mention about it. First of all, we do go through a planning process as a part of Cabinet every time we meet and look at upcoming board briefings and workshops. Now, primarily our focus is briefings because it's typically around recommendations that I'm bringing before the board. So, we've had a change of the board. We've had additional members, a new chair, and I just thought it would be a good time to bring this forward. Some of you have also mentioned it to me in your individual meetings. I will say that workshop topics are a good way for us as a governance team to set direction as a district and really provide a really good opportunity to open up for good discussion by the board, which briefings don't really allow for that. Just some feedback that we've received regarding workshop preferences that I'd be interested also in hearing in addition to just the topics themselves, but a little bit of feedback in terms of, venue. Now, I will weigh in and say that we are working toward a more mobile platform so that we can meet in this building and be able to have the versatility to do whatever, the taping and the microphones and all that kind of stuff. I do know that it's quite challenging to go off-site to Canal Street for some of staff, just to get everything over there and moved and then have people available to be there to support that effort. It's a little bit better for us to have it here, but in order to have it here, these microphones and so forth have to be uprooted, and we're working with Lauren to get, to again, provide a mobile platform. So if we want to have it in one of these training rooms, that we're able to have that and set that up quite well. I know that there's been some challenges for the board to put it down into the pit, because of the microphones up there interfering with these microphones, and then just kind of not being much of an advantage over being around the table versus being in a training room where you can really have a good discussion, look at each other and talk like around the table. But again, I know some of you have ideas about topics, so we're here to hear those. And then I would also like to hear preferences in terms of the timing of these topics, when you would like to get them fitted in. The last thing I want to say is that because of the number of times the board meets, typically twice a month, that fitting everything in is difficult. And so sometimes these workshops may have to be like off cycle or at a different time, like in the morning, so that we can continue to have the briefings.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, so can we start with you, Mrs. Morgan, and just come down the
Sure.
table and see what your
Okay.
preferences are for topics and timing?
So I would like to see us do a budget workshop, not briefing, that would include some of the new revenue initiatives we've had underway this year, naming rights, corporate solicitations, TIBO, et cetera. What are the action plans? Who's accountable? What are the real and anticipated costs, actual and anticipated revenues? And then on the cost-cutting side, a review of the KPI initiative. And then finally, the process improvement initiatives that are underway. I think if we did those three things at the same time we talked about the budget, that would be a good workshop. I would like to see a workshop on restorative justice, action plans, accountability, outcomes to date by school, teacher, school leadership, parent, and student feedback. I think with some of these initiatives, when the board talks about them, it would be really helpful to have not only input from the staff who are actually responsible for implementing the initiative, but also feedback from the people who are impacted by it, particularly teachers, perhaps students and parents. So that's that thought. I would like to see one on update on the ESE and ESOL transition. It's a new organization under new leadership. I think we have some significant challenges in the district relative to those things, and they do come up in the accreditation. So I would really like to see, again, the same thing. What are the goals? What are the action plans? Who's accountable? Preliminary results, challenges, and school leadership response to those challenges. And I would like to, I have a lot of things, guys, sorry. I would love to see a conversation about preschool preparedness. I know that as a district, we are working hard to develop partnerships with people in the community who are providing pre-K programs in addition to the Head Start program that we provide. And I know we've gone out for some grants with other organizations. I know we have set goals with some other organizations. I think it would be great for the board to hear who we're working with, what our goals are, that kind of thing. And then my usual, at some point, we need to have a sit-down about student outcomes by level, disaggregated demographically, using the new IT tools for evaluating student, school, and district performance. Then I would like to see us put into the protocol a board self-evaluation in June rather than March, simply because we have a new board, and that will give us about 6 months before we do the self-evaluation. And then I would like to see an update of 2020 in August, after we've completed the prior academic year. Perhaps an update in the morning with staff, and then superintendent and board goal setting in the afternoon of the same workshop. And I'm one of the people who likes the sitting in the round. I don't care where it is. I just like sitting in the round. So thank you for listening and giving me all that time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, that's quite a good list. Thank you. Dr. Cockle?
Actually, I support just about everything that you said as well. Those are all very interesting topics and things that we need to know about in order to make good decisions. My other area is that of growth. I would like to see our growth trends, not only in numbers, but in what parts of the county. I'd like to get a visual map of where we have property, what our thoughts are about how that property might be used, where we might have property that is not appropriate for or available to build a school on, and what our thoughts are about that. I'd also like to know what processes we use. I know what we had used in the past. When we think about building a school, we usually connect with the local cities or county in relation to their rec programs, so that we can combine our rec programs, our activities with theirs. And so that whole concept of where the growth is, what we're preparing to do, and I know we're talking about schools, and it just bothers me to think about a school individually without seeing the big picture. So if we put this here, what does that do to that part of the county? What are the anticipations for where we might build next, and why, and what level? so that we really come well prepared with data to make good decisions about our students and how we house them.
Yes, Mrs. Morgan?
Yeah, so I want to piggyback on that because working with construction advisory, it's clear that there are site situations for the MMM that will need some sort of county involvement. And so
Yes.
we should really be thinking about not only the county, but if we're in a city or whatever, we need to create a process for.
Collaborative.
Thank you.
That's a great idea.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Mrs. La Riviere?
Okay. Well, I love it. I love everything that you ladies shared. I'm 100% behind it. And I look at it, and when I took my aspect of workshop, I was thinking of workshops that we are actively engaged in, we are making decisions in to move us forward. So when I look at what you shared, they're more workshop briefings rather than, so, and I like that. I like that idea of having those. I think we need to have both components in place. So that it may give the superintendent more leeway. He may have briefings already planned for some of the topics that kind of lets both he and staff know, him and staff, well, anyway, they will know the times that they need to make sure that they make those more elongated and provide all the pieces that we need to make us more knowledgeable. Because it's true, we're all we have so many that are new and weren't here for some of the changes where some of us go, oh, well, I know how that's done, but not everybody does. And no one needs to hear it from us because we might say it wrong. But I do have real workshops that I thought of that we need to be actively engaged in. And one of those had to do with, in March, we are supposed to do our interim evaluation of the superintendent. And I believe that we need to do a workshop that does a review and an overview, not just of the interim evaluation, but also how it aligns with the final evaluation, so that everybody gets a good feel for how that can be done. And that way we can ask questions, and if we need to make adaptations, Dr. Atkins is there, and we can have that input. So that's one I believe that's a critical one that we need to make sure we do. And then I was very glad that NEA did their final convening here in the fall. And some of the board members and newly elected or those who were getting ready to maybe get involved were able to come to those workshops. And we made comments about some of them that we thought, oh, wouldn't it be great if the whole board could see this? All of those are done on YouTube. And so there could be some workshops that could be volunteer, you just choose you want to go to, but we would be able to look at that because there are some really great things that we can learn about innovations and some statistics and powerful components that will give us sound bites for when we're speaking to the community and they ask us questions about something. So that's one that I thought would be a great component to be. And the other one that I've been asking for a year, and that is we need to have a legislative advocacy workshop because we need to be more proactive in what we do. And as I'm preparing for going to the NSBA advocacy this weekend, they give us different webinars we can see prior to coming. And the one that I just saw, it's going to be available in 2 hours, and I will send it to you because it really talked about the component that we're missing, and that is using a citizen-concentric model where we are using our citizens to work alongside us and actually working together to provide good training for our citizens so they know appropriate ways and the best practices to use. For example, I listened to it today, and they said what they have found statistically, it's better not to go and leave your white paper behind. It's better to, the day before, send it to staff what it is you're going to be talking about, and not just be a white paper, but to say what it is so they see it ahead of time, and they are prepared for it, and so it's still going to be there after you leave. But there were some really great ideas that were ahas to me, very good pieces where they've done surveys with staff members for both national and state to find out which methods actually work the best. So I'm a big proponent that I think we need to do a really good advocacy workshop so we can come up with a plan that involves our community, and so we can work together with our city councils and with our county commissioners. So those are my three that I see that I think we need to do as working workshops.
Very good, thank you. Mrs.
Okay, so
Patrica.
I still don't know what my role is here on this board, so I'd really like to have a workshop where we can sit down and figure out what I'm supposed to do in terms of community engagement. For example, I have a couple of speaking engagements set, but I want to take the temperature of my fellow board members and figure out if that's something you want me to continue to do, or if there's somebody else who sits on this board who should be doing that better than I can. Email policy. I feel like we're not responding well enough to the community. I feel like we are responding, but they're not clear on the fact that you get a response from one board member, that means a response from all board members.
Exactly.
So I'm not clear on that. Something else we would discuss at that workshop would be the pluses and minuses. We get a statement of that from Susan after every board meeting, but I think we should take 10, 15 minutes after every board meeting to actually discuss them. Real-time feedback would be helpful to me. And I did actually write please in my notes. I would like to have the flexibility to call for a workshop when the subject matter is appropriate. So we will discuss things at the board table during briefings and during action meetings that will necessitate a workshop. Things that I will need to learn on the fly as we're going. I don't know if I need a workshop until the subject matter is presented to me.
You're right.
I don't know if it's going to be four board members one way, three board members another way, necessitating a workshop until we discuss that subject matter at the table. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And finally, I have a concern. This list, as it grows, as we go down, is getting to be as long as I am tall. What kind of a drain is that going to be on the superintendent and his staff? And how do we walk that line of making sure we're doing what's best for students while still gathering all of the information that we need to make good decisions? That's it.
Very good questions, excellent. Mrs. Morgan?
Yeah, I think the last thing that Ms. Patrica brought up, just really everything, that public communication, I think that should be one of our master board on-site trainings, and that takes it out of the workshop pile and puts it into
Right.
professional facilitation with someone, so that all the board members can participate in that conversation, and we can come up with something that's firm.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and I was going to say to you that a lot of those questions can be answered through FSBA, your role as a board member, and then we can make agreements about who's going to cover what, and I think Dr. Kuckel already suggested that that would be another thing that we would do, and that, we could do that in our office with Susan and Linda, to set up that kind of a calendar rotation or whatever it might be. So some of those questions will be answered in FSBA trainings, and it takes a little time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it feels like I'm wasting time. I've been here for how long now? 2 months, maybe?
You
And
have
I
not
just feel
wasted
like
any
we've had
time.
some missed opportunities in terms of engagement with the community. So I'm not patient, sorry.
That's okay.
That's
That's one of
okay.
the things we'll learn about me on Friday.
Mrs. LaRiviere?
I got frustrated when, after a meeting, someone would say, okay, this is what we need to do for student advisory. And then people would be told, I'd rather say, let's get together for 30 minutes as a team here in the office to kind of hash those things out. Because when it's done on the fly, messages get crossed. And just to be able to sit there with Linda or Susan or both of them and make sure we get those components together, I think is really important.
That's a great suggestion. I think we can answer a lot of questions in that manner. And yes, that's a great idea. Okay.
Well, all I was going to say is I echo everything you said, and I'm like Chris, sooner than later, because I feel like I've got a lot of catching up to do. So the sooner the better that I think we can make sound decisions. So I know part of the schedule, I was part of some of the scheduling conflict because I've got a daughter that's decided to do cheerleading again. So I'm running a lot again. But I mean, I'm willing to take the time and do what's necessary to educate myself. So I'm ready to go. So sooner the better. So that's all I wanted to say for me.
And I apologize, Dr. Atkins, you were so far away, I didn't see your hand up. Can you come back over here, please?
Just one comment. I know that some of the roles and responsibilities would be in your protocols, and I don't know who's really responsible for policing and advising board members when it comes to the use of protocols. There is a piece on there about correspondence, and I'm making the assumption, maybe Mr. Martin could enlighten us, but this question about who responds to email and so forth, I remember in the past, and I do see it in the protocols, at least as it relates to correspondence, is that's typically a board chair responsibility working with staff to respond, so that your chair would respond on behalf of the board. We've had a couple of situations here recently where the board was asked for a response, and there was individual board members responded, but there wasn't a one response that came from the board. Working with past superintendents, I do know that that has worked in the past for a while. So that's one example that, in terms of the role of a board member, that appears to me to be contained in the protocols. So probably something that Ms. Fisher and I could do is to make sure that we're working through the protocols, and then come back as it relates to things such as correspondence, which I know a couple of you have raised.
Great, thank you. Mrs. LaRiviere, and then
And
Dr.
as you
Kuckel.
mentioned that, it goes along with everything. I think a lot will be answered when we do the protocol handbook, and I think protocol handbook needs to be the first workshop, and whether it's 4 hours or longer, to make sure we go through it and we feel comfortable with it.
Okay, and that was one of my two that I was going to add to the list, and that was for us to review and refine the board protocols so that everyone's clear on them. And there are a lot of them that are kind of redundant as I read through again. So I think that we can really condense it quite a bit and touch on every one of those primary topics like correspondence and community involvement and that kind of thing, and really have it in a document that won't be so cumbersome that you're afraid to sit down and read it because it'll take you 3 hours. So that was one of the things, and I'm happy to work on that together in workshop. Yeah. And did you have something else, Dr. Adkins?
No, that was it. That was
Okay.
the main thing I wanted to point
And then
out.
I think Dr. Kuckel had something else.
Yeah, within that protocol, I think for me, there's an urgency for one thing, and that's that we get some language that we all use when we respond to a complaint or a parent that refers it on to Dr. Atkins, but we use the same wording.
Right.
And so when you get a copy of that, or I get a copy and it's come from someone else, it's all said in the same way,
Right.
and we know it's official.
Yeah, and we did create something like that at one point, and then,
I loved it the first year that I was on the board, when Miss Morgan was the chair, and it was just stated, the chair will do the response.
yes,
And especially when you see it sent to all board members, when we know. The
Right.
chair does that initially, and the language would stay the same every time. If we got an individual one, we just copied all board members and just assumed maybe they didn't get it.
Well, that's what's in your protocol.
Yeah.
Right, that's exactly what's in the
And so what we have
protocol.
done is we are way off, and we got off the basis last year. So I just think we need to go back to that as a,
Make sure we all have it.
we just need to do this,
Right.
Same
What about, didn't we create a new board email address that goes to the secretaries, that goes to Linda and
We
Susan?
talked about that.
Talked about it, but we haven't acted on it.
Yes, there is
There is
one.
one.
Yes,
So,
yes.
do we want Linda and Susan to respond to those emails and copy us and use that standard language? All board member, like, a response from, this response is considered a response from the entire board. I'd like that language to be part of a
Yes,
standard
yes.
response.
And I think that maybe that would be something that we could discuss when we have our sit-down with them.
On Friday,
To
even.
see if that fits into their, yeah. I don't know if Linda, if you want to address any of that right now, or,
I'm just thinking these poor girls are, now have 7 of us to deal with. And, but maybe, so I hope they're honest with us.
yes, and I'm sure there, but let's, I'll put that on my list, and then we can have that discussion with them when we have our meeting in the office with the staff. Okay, anything else? So we have quite a list of topics. Some might be able to be condensed. And then as far as the timelines that were provided, I think they're good, and I don't know if everyone is in agreement that the first thing we need to do is to review the protocols and agree on a common language and a statement and what our process is going to be for community involvement. Mrs. Morgan, and then Dr. Atkins.
We haven't said whether we're willing to put in an entire day. In other words, double up. At one point, we were doing workshops in the morning, briefings in the afternoon, board meeting at night. And I think we need to know to what extent board members are willing to commit a great deal more time going forward than we did this past year.
Yes.
So I throw that out. I am, but
Okay. Well, then let's just do a casual poll, and, is there anyone who is opposed to a full day, to do a workshop and then a briefing and a board meeting, and put in a full day? Because then you don't have to make 2 trips, and it doesn't spill over into your calendar where you may have other commitments on other days. So is that,
I'm okay. Sooner the better.
okay? Okay.
Yeah, it works out well, and we also get a lunchtime, so it could either be working lunch or chat while you eat, so. Okay, I believe
I know
food
you
is
will not let
essential
us-
for building relationships.
It is.
Love, yes. Dr. Atkins?
Well, first comment about the all-day. If you're doing that, it would be better for me personally if it were on-site and not somewhere else.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The other comment in looking at the topics that have been listed that I think is rather timely is that we have already kicked off our FY18 budget process. So I think for the board to have have meaningful discussion and set direction regarding our budget, that's something that I think needs to come up sooner rather than later.
Okay. So then 1 protocols and 2 budget, and then we can agree on the timeline for the rest based on how Dr. Atkins and his staff can fit it into their work days, because I know that a lot of it involves work on their part, and we don't want to overtax them in an effort to get the information that we need.
The third one will surely needs to be the review and training for this evaluation of the superintendent, because it's the end of January and we're supposed to do that in March. So that would need to be done sometime in February.
Any other suggestions, questions? Okay. Then, Mr. Martin, do you have anything else?
Nothing this time, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Atkins, any more comments?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Okay, great. Anything for the good of the order? Mrs. LaRiviere?
Just a reminder that I had sent everyone by email the homework for the Advocacy Institute, and just to let you know, part of the pieces that I'm going to be using will be the DOE feedback on ESSA, that I will also use to show how we as a state are not compliant. The good thing about going with the whole group from the nation is each state handles all of that differently. And when I was there a year and a half ago, people were surprised when those of us from Florida were saying that, well, it's nice that you're saying local, but it never trails down to the local. The state winds up making the decision, and they were surprised. That was not really the intent, and so there will be, so we're looking forward to that. So if you can just, anything that you want to share with me, and then Dr. Atkins, I believe you have some staff helping with some of those homework questions, and I'll put in what the pieces I know.
Great, and thank you for doing that, Mrs. LaRiviere. That's a big one. And Mrs. Patrica?
You asked for feedback, and so on number 5, I'd like it if you have the opportunity to stress the choice system that we already have here, how wonderful it is, how proud we are of it, and while we do have charter schools here, that's not the central focus of our system of choice.
Exactly, and for us with the choice, even the charter schools, we are very fortunate in Lee County that the charter schools, most of the charter schools are schools that are of necessity. They're meeting a need.
Right.
And so that we really do appreciate, and we've been that way for a long time. So yes, and that's one that I didn't put down for a stressor for getting homework, because I feel like we've got that part pretty nailed. And so I'm looking forward to sharing that with staff of Senator Nelson and Senator Rubio, and we'll start to say Mario, and and Congressman Rooney staff. So we are looking forward to sharing that, because I don't think people realize just what's going on that's so good
Thank you.
down here. Oh, and then 2 other things. At the last board meeting, I was not able to attend. Did we select an FSBA alternate? You're the alternate.
Yes.
Fine. So did that paperwork get sent in?
I believe it did,
You
yes.
signed it, and perfect. And then maybe, well, yes, now's the time to bring it up. Because Mary, you and I had been talking about all the different things that you have on your plate. If you look at where we choose our who does what, Ms. Fisher has an awful lot that's on there. And so she was wondering, maybe we need to, so I'm just mentioning that was part of the conversation. Would you like us to look at the legislative liaison piece? And so I'm just throwing that out there while we have a team together.
I think at this time, since I'm this many months into it for this year, I think I'll stay on it
Well,
through
and
session.
it changes in July, so
Yes.
that's where.
Yeah, so I think
So-
I'll stay on it. After conversation with Dr. Atkins and Mr. Sarah and some other people, I decided that I should just continue the momentum, because otherwise it's another learning curve for someone
So
else.
please, at any time, will you please let us know
Absolutely.
what we can do to assist?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay.
I just wanted to mention one quick
Doctor.
thing, since Ms. LaRiviere brought it up. I know that Mr. Mora is headed up to Tallahassee, I believe it's tomorrow, Mark, and he's going to be presenting about our student assignment system, because we're really we're really the only district left in the state of Florida that has a choice system like that's designed like the one that we have. They're very interested in hearing about it. I believe it's the Innovation Committee is it the House? Okay, so he's going up tomorrow to do that at the request of FADS, and so again, they're interested in hearing what we have got going on down here in Lee County.
Great, thank you. Okay, seeing no other business to come before this board, this meeting is adjourned, and we will follow with a 5-minute recess and then be back for the briefing meeting chaired by Dr. Cuckle. Thank you.